In antiquity and the Middle Ages, philosophy was something not just abstract and theoretical, but something very practical and experiential. So how do we experience reality? And you can check that as I'm speaking. So it seems that usually, ordinarily, we seem to experience the world as something external to us. We even call it the world outside. And we tend to experience our thoughts and emotions as something which is internal. It's inside us. So we think that there is the world out there and I'm somewhere here. So T.S. Eliot, in his poem Ash Wednesday, he has this beautiful phrase, that which is contained in the hollow round of my skull. And he refers to our experience of the self. The self we feel is contained somewhere in the hollow round of our skull. We look at the external world through the windows of our eyes. So I'm here, the world is there. And we experience the world as consisting of things separated from each other. So the reality seems to be a heap of things, and we tend to think about ourselves as another thing locked in the hollow round of our skulls. Plotinus, who was a philosopher living in the 3rd century AD, thought it's not normal, it's not natural. This way of experiencing reality is a result of something which he called, following Plato, the fall of the soul. The fall of the soul is a kind of self-limitation, excessive self-limitation, self-narrowing of our consciousness, of awareness. Instead of seeing the whole of reality, we shrink and we think that we are a very small thing inside our head and there is this huge external, material, physical world around us. But this is not reality. It's a very limited view on reality. And the purpose of philosophy, of meditation, spiritual exercises is to break us out of this prison in which we put ourselves. There are two key concepts in Plotinus's metaphysics: participation and image. So participation is a way of seeing reality as unity, as one thing. But it's not just one thing, and it doesn't blur distinctions. Participation means that hierarchically and vertically, every level of reality is in a way higher level of reality, and horizontally, everything and every self is every other self, but the distinctions remain real. So participation in Plotinus means that the source of all reality, the source of existence, the one or the good or the highest God, he or it makes reality, first spiritual reality, and then through spiritual reality, the physical or the sensible universe is made. But the sensible or physical universe participates in the spiritual world, and the spiritual world participates in the one. And within these realms, parts participate in each other and in a whole. So everything is united. This is participation. What is the image from a metaphysical perspective in Plotinus? Image, for Plotinus, everything is an image except for the one, except for the highest God. He's the ultimate archetype. But everything else is an image of something. An image, says Plotinus, it's not like a painted portrait. So he says, don't think about a painted portrait. Why? Because you can make a portrait of someone, this person dies, the portrait still hangs on the wall. So the portrait is something completely different, completely separated from the model. Plotinus says, think about a mirror, a reflection in a mirror or in water. Because if I'm standing in front of a mirror, I'm projecting my image, but when I go away, there is no image in the mirror. So image is constantly, continuously projected, dynamically projected by the archetype. But Plotinus says, this is not a satisfying metaphor either, because a mirror image is outside of its archetype. Well, metaphysically speaking, every image is inside its archetype. So the world is an image of God, but it's not projected outside of God. There is nothing outside of God. It's introjected So the world is within God as its image. And first, the spiritual world is an image of God, and the spiritual world projects inside the mirror image that is physical or sensible universe. Why I'm speaking about Plotinus? Because Plotinus was the greatest influence on the whole tradition of Christian Platonism from antiquity to the Middle Ages. Plotinus influenced St. Augustine greatly, Boethius in the West, and in the East, the so-called Cappadocian Fathers, the Dionysius, the Areopagites, so the greatest philosophers of Christianity in the Latin West and the Eastern the Eastern Greek, they were influenced by this vision of reality, and they thought this is easily Christianized. This is Christianized. This is the truth about reality. So Plotinus says that nature or the universe is an image, a mirror image of the spiritual world. And this is repeated further by Christian thinkers. So Plotinus says that when we look at this sensible world, we actually see the spiritual world as reflected. But it doesn't mean that it's some kind of illusion. And even now, when we look at images or pictures, we can understand what it means for Plotinus that an image is real, but at the same time, its entire reality is dependent on the archetype. So whatever is real in an image is not the image, it's the archetype. If, for instance, you show a picture of your child to someone, they never say, "Oh, how cute this digital picture is." No, they say, "How cute your son is," for instance. Or if you look into a mirror, you say, "Oh, I have something on my nose." You never say, "Oh, there is something on the image of my nose." So we tend to assume that the image is the thing, is the thing that it reflects, right? So when you have a Zoom conversation, you sort of feel like you're talking to an actual person and not to your own screen. But from the outside perspective, you look like a crazy person talking to a screen. So in the same sense, this sensible universe is an image, ultimately an image of God, a mirror image of God. Saint Bonaventure, great Christian philosopher of the 13th century, says in one of his works, "Et sic patet quod totus mundus, et sicut unum speculum, plenum luminibus presentantibus divinam sapientiam," which means it is obvious that the entire world is like a mirror image presenting the lights of divine wisdom. What does it mean? That if you look at the world right now, at the sensible world, you are looking at God reflected in the mirror. You're looking at the face of God right now, or your entire life, or you're having a Zoom conversation with God. But the problem is that we are looking at an image and we think that it's divorced from its archetype. We cannot see the archetype through the image because of the fall of the soul. So nature is a great image of the face of God. Also, for Christians, the soul is an image of God. According to the book of Genesis, the famous verse, chapter 1, verse 26, man was created in the image of God. So they use Plotinus' philosophy to say that our soul is an image of God. And again, for instance, St. Gregory of Nyssa, famous Christian philosopher living in the 4th century, said, if you want to see God, you have to look into your own mind. When you meditate and you try to look into the essence of your mind, you will see God reflected in your soul as if in a mirror. Our souls are also mirrors. So when we look inwardly, when we look so-called outwardly, we see God's face. When we look inwardly, we also see God's face. The problem is that the mirror is dirty. But when we clear the mirror, we see the light of the face of God shining inside of us, because we are mirrors and images too. And also our way of knowing reality is an image of God. So Aristotle said that soul is in a way all things. We don't see the world as something separate from ourselves. Aristotle said that if I see a tree in a sensible way, my soul becomes the tree. And if I understand the tree intellectually, on an even deeper level, I become the tree. Because knowledge is the union of what we call the subject and the object, or mind and reality. And Plotinus develops this view further and believes that when we look at reality, we become one with reality. And Christian philosophers followed up on that and developed that view as well. So truth is light in this worldview. It's not a property of sentences or propositions. Truth is light that reveals reality. So our knowledge of reality is in fact our union with reality, and out of this union, language and understanding is born. Another aspect of Plotinian metaphysics, which continued its existence in the Christian Platonic metaphysics, is the claim that to be a person is to be everything. So we tend to think about person as an isolated, independent, autonomous entity, which is completely illusory and false. And in fact, for Plotinus, to be a person means to be every other self and everything without losing our distinct selfhood. It's a paradox. So he says that we are each other, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we don't exist. It doesn't mean that there is no such a thing as an individual self. And he described the entire reality as, he used a neologism, pamprosopon, which means being all faces. He said, the universe is shining with living faces. Everything is a face, which means everything is a person, a personal being. There are no things in the world. There are just living, shining, personal faces which are united with each other. And St. Augustine thought it's an excellent description of what angels and human souls are. So Augustine believed that angels are individual, but they are a sort of a common organism, one organism, creatura spiritualis, spiritual creature, because every angel is transparent to every other angel. So angels are within themselves, they co-inhere in themselves, and the same is true for us. So we are not separate from other people, and we are relational by nature. To be a person is to be in a relationship. And for Christians, God himself as a trinity is also subsisting relations, as it was called in medieval philosophy. And the last thing I want to talk about is the idea of the unconscious, which emerged in Plotinus and then was developed further in Christian Platonic tradition. So Plotinus says that our awareness is very limited. So what we are conscious of is just a fragment of ourselves and reality. So we can say that there is a realm below our consciousness, which is our desires, impulses connected to our body, our animal part of our nature. We are not conscious of what is going on in our bodies. We are not conscious of all our desires. And there is also what is above our consciousness. And this is what I was talking about all the time. So the spiritual world and God, we are also not conscious of this. So Plotinus believes in subconsciousness and superconsciousness, we might say, or two kinds of the unconscious. And what Augustine does with it, he adds an important dimension to it by using a scriptural text, Psalm 19, verse 12, which says, praise to God, cleanse me of my hidden sins. So Augustine says, what are these hidden sins? Am I not aware of, my sinful thoughts, desires, emotions? Am I not transparent to myself? Clearly not. The Bible says there are things that I don't know about myself. So Augustine develops this divine psychoanalysis, which is called confessio, confession. So in prayer, we have to enter into a dialogue with God, because when we reveal ourselves to God, in fact, God reveals ourselves to ourselves. So we can become conscious of the unconscious through this dialogical relationship with God. But the unconscious for Augustine, this lower unconscious for Augustine, is a horrible thing. He says it's vile, it's distorted, it's sinful. So in this sense, Augustine comes close to Sigmund Freud in believing that the hidden realm of our soul is filled with distorted, perverse desires. While Plotinus seems to come close to Carl Gustav Jung, because he recognizes the existence of the subconscious, but he also he emphasizes that what we really are unconscious of is the higher layer of our soul, the divine realm, the spiritual realm. We are filled with gods and spirits and shining living faces, and in fact all reality is contained within our soul. We are just not aware of that. And philosophy is again a kind of spiritual practice that reveals to us reality of nature, reality of ourselves, of our relationship, and ultimately the reality of God, the source of all existence. Thank you.
Thank you much.